I carried the war home in my bones. 3 years in the campaign, the mud, the cannon's smoke, the cold that settled into a man's joints and never truly left. And when I rode up the Caldwell Drive at last, the first thing I saw was not the house I remembered, but a black crepe bow still hanging from the gate post, faded to gray by weather and time. They had mourned me, and then I would learn they had moved on. My name is Edmund Caro, the Duke of Ashbourne, and I had been engaged to Viola Caldwell since I was 26, and she was 20. It was an arrangement my mother had made, and I had not disputed. Viola was beautiful and composed, and I was a man who had never much examined his own heart. I rode to war believing she would wait. I believed, I suppose, the way a man believes in weather, because it has always been one way, and he has never tested it. I sent a letter from the field hospital in my 3rd year when the fever broke and I knew I would live. It was a plain letter: I am alive. I am coming home. Hold fast. I rode up that drive believing she had. The butler who met me at the door was new, young, startled, the kind of pale that comes from receiving an unexpected ghost. He showed me into the drawing room and went to fetch the family, and I stood there among the furniture I half remembered, the smell of beeswax and damp stone, and I waited. It was not Viola who came in first. It was her younger sister, Elspeth. I had known Elspeth Caldwell as a girl, quiet, bookish, the one who sat in the corner at her sister's engagement dinner and watched everything without appearing to watch anything. She had been 17 then. She was 20 now, and something in the intervening years had settled in her face like iron beneath silk. She stopped in the doorway when she saw me, and for a moment she did not move. Most people who saw me that autumn looked through me or around me, their eyes sliding to the side the way eyes do when they encounter something uncomfortable. Elspeth looked at me directly. "Your Grace," she said, "you are alive." "I am," I said. "Is that a problem?" Something moved across her face, not quite a flinch. "No," she said carefully, "it is not a problem. It is complicated." I did not know yet how true that was. Her mother appeared behind her, all rustling silk and managed alarm. Then her father, white-haired and heavy, who gripped my hand with real warmth and real distress in equal measure. They sat me down. They brought port. And then, because there was no good way to do it, her father told me. Viola had married Mr. Gerald Harridge in the spring of my 2nd year abroad. A comfortable man, a safe man, a man who was not rumored dead. They lived in Shropshire and had a daughter now, 8 months old, with Harridge's round face and Viola's fair coloring. I did not speak for a long moment. "She believed you were gone," her mother said, and her voice had that quality of a sentence that has been rehearsed but still wobbles at the end. "Of course," I said. I looked at Elspeth. She was looking at her hands. They offered me the east wing for as long as I needed. The roads were poor, the hour was late, the least they could do. I accepted because I was too tired to refuse, and because something about the way Elspeth had looked at her hands would not leave me. I stayed 3 days. I told myself it was practical. The roads were indeed poor. I had business with the family solicitor in the village, and I was not ready to return to Ashbourne Hall, where the rooms would be cold, and the staff would look at me with that same mixture of relief and alarm that I was finding everywhere I went. The Duke who came back from the dead. The inconvenient resurrection. On the 2nd morning, I found Elspeth in the library before breakfast, a book open on her knee that she was not reading. "You are an early riser," I said. "I find the house quieter before the others come down." She paused. "You may have the room if you prefer. I can go." "I don't prefer it." I crossed to the window. Rain on the park, the elms going bare, the gravel drive a dull pewter. "What are you reading?" She looked down at the book as though she had forgotten it was there. "I'm not, particularly." "What are you thinking about then?" A long silence, then, whether to tell you something. I turned from the window. She had the kind of stillness that comes not from tranquility, but from long practice in holding things in. The kind I recognized from soldiers who had seen too much, and learned to carry it without showing the weight. "Tell me," I said. "Not yet." She closed the book and stood. "I don't not yet, I'm sorry." And she left before I could answer, and I stood there in the library with the rain on the glass and the clear sense that something had shifted under my feet, though I could not have said yet what it was. That evening there was a small dinner. The family, a neighboring vicar and his wife, the family solicitor and his elderly mother, all arranged with the cheerful, terrible efficiency of a household that needs to fill silences. I sat at one end of the table and watched Elspeth at the other, and I began to understand something I had not articulated yet. She watched everything, but since I had arrived, she watched me differently than she watched the rest, with a quality of attention that was almost painful, the kind that belongs to someone who is keeping count, who is waiting for a particular moment to arrive. The vicar asked me about the campaign. I gave him the answer I had learned to give, short, general, sanitized. He nodded gravely and said that we owed much to men like me. The solicitor's mother told me that her nephew had served in the same theater of war and been killed at Corunna, and I said I was sorry, and I meant it. Elspeth said nothing during this. She cut her food into small, even pieces and ate a little of it and said nothing. And once, when she thought I was not looking, she pressed her fingers flat on the table as though anchoring herself. After dinner, when the others had moved to the parlor, I found her in the corridor putting on a shawl. "You're going out?" I asked. The rain had stopped. "Just to the garden. I do sometimes in the evening." A beat. "You could come if you wanted." It was not an invitation so much as a permission. I followed her out. We walked the gravel paths in the near dark, the smell of wet earth and something burning somewhere in the village, the sky clearing to show a cold spread of stars. She walked with her arms folded across her chest, the shawl pulled tight, and she did not make conversation. I found I did not need her to. "How long have you known," I said finally, "that I was alive?" Her step slowed. She did not stop, but they slowed. "A letter came," she said, "to the house. Addressed to Viola, but it arrived when Viola was already in Shropshire, already settled, already 2 months into her marriage." A pause. "My mother brought it to me. She didn't know what it was. I opened it. The night air was very cold. It said, 'I am alive. I am coming home. Hold fast.'" She said the words without inflection, as though she had said them to herself many times before and worn off all their feeling. By the time I had read it, Viola was already someone else's wife. I walked beside her and said nothing. "I told my mother," Elspeth said. She said there was nothing to be done. Viola was married. To tell Viola would only cause her pain, and it would cause Mr. Harridge pain, and they had a life. My mother said the kindest thing was to let it lie." She stopped walking. She turned to face me. "I did not think it was the kindest thing. I thought it was the easiest thing. But I was 20 years old and I had no power in that house, and I said nothing. I have said nothing for 3 years. I wanted you to know that I knew and that I am sorry and that I have no excuse worth giving you." The starlight on her face, the complete absence of self-defense. "You wrote to me," I said. "I tried twice. The letters came back. The campaign had moved. There was no reliable direction. I didn't know how to find you." She looked away. "I thought about it constantly, every month for 3 years, whether there was a way, whether I should have done more. Whether knowing would have been better than not knowing." She pressed her lips together. "I don't know the answer still." I stood in her family's garden in the dark, and I thought about what it means to receive news that would shatter someone and be 20 years old and powerless, and to still have tried. To have written the letters, to have looked for the direction, to carry the weight of it for 3 years in silence, and then, when the man finally appeared on the doorstep, to look him directly in the eye. "You looked at me," I said. "When you came into the drawing room, you looked at me directly. I thought I owed you that much." Her voice was very quiet. "I had been rehearsing what I would say for 3 years against the possibility you might come back. And then you were simply there. And I was so relieved you were alive and so ashamed, and I couldn't say any of it in front of my mother, so I said only that it was complicated, which is the most insufficient word in the English language." I looked at her for a long moment. This woman who had tried, who had carried something that was not hers to carry, that her mother had put in her hands and her sister had made necessary, who had looked at me directly in the first moment and then had spent 2 days finding the courage to tell me the truth. "It was complicated," I said. "You were not wrong." She let out a breath. It was not quite a laugh. "You are being generous." "I am being accurate." I turned back toward the house. "Come inside." "It's cold." I did not leave the next morning. I told myself I still had business with the solicitor. I told myself the roads. I told myself various things. What I knew, with the particular clarity that comes to men who have spent 3 years making decisions in half-seconds on the basis of incomplete information, was that I had found something in Elspeth Caldwell's honesty that I had never once encountered in 3 years of drawing rooms and ballrooms before the war. She did not perform. She did not manage. She told me a hard truth because she believed I was owed it, and then she asked for nothing, not forgiveness, not absolution, not even understanding. She had given me the account and stepped back and let me make of it what I would. I had spent 29 years among people who told me what they thought I wished to hear. I had been engaged to a woman who had waited, apparently, less than 18 months before concluding I was a manageable loss. I had come home expecting grief or guilt or perhaps a complicated gratitude, and instead I had found a girl in a library who was not reading a book, and a woman in a garden telling me the truth. I went to find her father after breakfast. He was in his study, already alert, already braced, the look of a man who has been anticipating a difficult conversation and has had time to fear it. "I owe you an apology, Your Grace," he said before I could speak. "What happened, what Viola did, what my wife counseled, it was not right. I said as much to Mrs. Caldwell at the time, but she—" "I am not here about Viola," I said. He stopped, he looked at me. "I am here about Elspeth," I sat. "I would like to call on her with your permission if she is willing, formally, whatever form that takes, given the irregular circumstances." I paused. "I am aware it is abrupt. I am aware 3 days is not, I am aware of all of that. But I have spent 3 years in places where the wrong decision meant a man's life, and I have learned not to hesitate when I am certain." Her father looked at me for a long moment. Then he set down his pen and folded his hands on the desk. "Are you certain?" he said. "I am," I said. "I would like to know if she is willing." She was in the morning room when he sent for her, and I watched through the half-open door as he spoke to her quietly, and I watched her face. First surprise, genuine and unperformed. Then something careful, something that was almost fear. Then, and this was what made me certain past any doubt, something that looked like the end of a long vigil. Like a woman who has held herself very still for 3 years being told she was allowed, finally, to breathe. She came to the door of the study herself. She looked at me. "I understand you wish to call on me," she said. "If you are willing," I said. She was quiet for a moment. "I did not do anything right in all of this." "You did several things right," I said. "You told me the truth. You tried to find me. You looked me in the eye in the first moment. Those are not small things, Elspeth." I had not used her name aloud before. We both seemed to notice it at the same time. "I am not asking because I have no one else or because you are what remains. I am asking because I spent 2.5 days watching you, and I have never in my life encountered anyone quite like you." She looked at me for a long time. The morning light came through the window and lay across the floor between us. "Yes," she said finally, "I am willing." We did not have an easy courtship by anyone's measure. There were people who found the whole arrangement distasteful, the Caldwell name attached to a second scandal in 3 years, the Duke who had come back from the dead and turned with suspicious swiftness to the younger sister. There were whispers. There were drawing rooms in which I was spoken of with the particular malice that passes in that world for social concern. I did not, I confess, find this particularly difficult to endure. I had been shot at. Elspeth endured it with the same still composure she had brought to 3 years of guilt and 2 days of waiting for the right moment to speak. And on the few occasions I saw it cost her something, a set expression at a dinner table, a too long pause at a pointed remark. I found myself thinking about a garden in starlight and a woman who gave a hard account and asked for nothing in return. Viola wrote once, a brief and not entirely gracious letter that said she wished us well and hoped there were no hard feelings as we were family still. I replied that I bore her no ill will. This was mostly true. What I felt toward Viola was not anger so much as a faint, permanent astonishment, the astonishment of a man who has revised his image of someone entirely and found the original had never quite existed. She had been beautiful and composed, and I had not examined it beyond that. Elspeth was something else. She was real in the way that a cold morning is real, a thing that asks you to meet it on its own terms. I proposed in the library, where I had first found her not reading. She was not reading again, which I had by that point come to understand was her most particular form of thinking. I sat across from her, and I said that I loved her, and that I intended to spend whatever years I had left trying to be worthy of the kind of honesty she had given me in a garden in the dark, and that I was aware this was an unusual basis for a proposal, but that it was the truest thing I knew to say. She set down the book she was not reading. "You are the strangest man I have ever known," she said. "You came home from a war that killed almost everyone around you, discovered your entire future had been rearranged without your knowledge, and your response was to stay an extra day and ask inconvenient questions in the library." "2 extra days," I said, "and the garden." "2 extra days," she agreed. "And then you proposed to the person who arguably caused the problem." "You tried to fix it," I said, "twice, and then you told me the truth when you could have said nothing at all." I looked at her steadily. "I am not a man given to overlooking things, Elspeth. I saw what you did. I see what you are. I would very much like to spend the rest of my life in proximity to both." She looked at me for a long time. "Yes," she said, "all right, yes." We were married in the spring, in the small church in the village where her father's family had worshipped for 3 generations. There was no spectacle. I had had enough of spectacle to last several lifetimes. There was only the gray stone of the church, and the early light through old glass, and the vicar whose nephew had been killed at Corunna, who married us with the solemnity of a man who understood something about what it means for people to come home and to be chosen. Her hand in mine at the altar was steady as she had always been. I had prepared words, some formal thing, some declaration that would suit the occasion, and then I looked at her face and said instead, "You were the one who tried to find me." "I was," she said quietly. "That is all I need to know," I said. "That will always be all I need to know." The vicar cleared his throat gently. We married. There is a library at Ashbourne Hall that I had not much used before the war. It is a good room, east-facing, well lit in the mornings, with deep chairs and the smell of leather and old paper, and in the years since my return it has become the room I most associate with the sound of Elspeth not reading. She is there most mornings when I come down. Sometimes she looks up. Sometimes she doesn't. Always she is carrying something in her face that I have come to understand as thought, as the particular interior life of a woman who has spent 20 years noticing more than she says and weighing it longer than anyone guesses. 3 years of silence and what she carried in it. The 2 letters returned undelivered. The weight of a thing she had not caused and could not fix, carried faithfully, set down only when she could lay it in the right hands. I came home from the war a man who had been shot at and frozen and half drowned in a Portuguese river, and reduced by fever to a weight I care not to remember. And the thing that brought me back to life was not a grand reckoning or a public claim, but an ordinary morning in a country library, and a woman with a book open on her knee that she was not reading, deciding whether to tell me the truth. She told me. I have been grateful every day since.